Good evening and welcome to the March 10th meeting of the Subcommittee on Public Works. Everyone please rise and salute the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I stand corrected. That's March 11th. We have three items before us this evening, and I'm going to take the first one. It's relative to snow plowing in the city. Read the motion, please.
Motion presented by Councilor Correggio that the mayor request the DPW superintendent to appear before the Public Works Subcommittee to examine the guidelines used for hiring plow drivers to include but not limited to truck size, equipment, and operator capability. I have received many complaints about the undersized trucks plowing during the previous blizzard and complaints about damage to parked vehicles. Further, that flags or signage be used on the City of Revere trucks for identifying purposes.
I'm going to ask that everyone keep their comments to a minimum because we have three items here this evening and we have another subcommittee meeting at 5:45. Councilor Correggio, maker of the motion.
Thank you very much, Donnie. Thank you for coming before us, and Paula Genzio. I'm not on this committee, but this is just basically to try to find out how private contractors are hired, the procedure. Is there any guidelines stating that they're checked out on how to plow, and small vehicles, basically with a big storm. I know we're kind of handicapped for hiring private contractors. As far as the Public Works, I think they did a tremendous job for what they did, for what they have. So also, how much are they paid, small trucks versus the big truck? And also, Ira Novoselska made a suggestion about the flags going on the truck. So can you comment a little bit about the guidelines with private?
Yeah, I can give you a brief overview. Obviously, Paul and myself would love to have larger equipment if it was available to us. We can't even get it. So we take, basically when you get a big storm, we basically had, I think during the blizzard, we had 59 privates roughly, and probably 12, 13 pieces of our own that was out there. A lot of the bigger, heavier equipment is promised to shopping centers, the airport, General Electric, stuff like that. Over the years, it's been harder to get the heavier equipment because due to the economy, a lot of businesses don't have as much heavy equipment available, but we get as much as we can, and the simple fact is that when you do get a big storm of the magnitude that we had during the blizzard, is that there are a lot of trucks, smaller trucks on the road, John, but those smaller trucks are instructed just to make sure that we can keep the roadways open so that emergency vehicles such as police and fire can access any neighborhood within the community, and then as the subsequent days after that, we can get in there and clean up, push things back, do some snow removal and stuff like that. But during the blizzard itself, I mean, it was a very trying, 24 hours. We got more snow in that 24 hours than any time previous to that. And this past storm was a little, to me, was more of a problem for us because of the timing of the storm when it came during the morning commute, trying to get kids to school, pulling equipment off the roads to get the schools cleared. So there were some times when obviously we feel we could have done a better job if our equipment wasn't tied up in other areas. And the other problem during this recent storm was that a lot of equipment that was available to us during the bigger storm was not available to us when we called the contractors. For one reason or another, they couldn't provide the same number of pieces or the larger equipment that we needed. But Paul can give you a rundown on the cost of the vehicles, the size of the vehicles, and the difference that we pay for each people. All all the drivers, especially those that require CDL licenses, are required to provide them to us before and with their insurance from the contractors that they do work for. But those are the questions I can let Paul answer if you need any operational problems. I think probably the both of us could answer both of those questions. But the big question being is that we obviously would like to have more larger equipment that we could lease than some of the smaller stuff, but it just wasn't available to us at the time.
Thank you, Superintendent.
Just one last question. Is there someone to come and check out after, if you assign a private contractor to an area, to check out to see if it was plowed right, or stacks of high snow? Sometimes it could be on corners, because I got complaints about that. They couldn't see coming out of the streets.
Well, I talked to Nick Catanazzo. That's an issue that's been a problem for a long, long time. I think we need to develop an ordinance to deal with that. Especially around schools and on the Broadway district, Revere Street area, Shirley Ave, Beach McConnell. It is, I agree with you, Jack. Something needs to be done in that regard about stacking snow on corners. And a lot of that is not done by city employees or city contractors. It's done by local business people and people that are clearing out their yards and driveways and pushing the snow down the street and piling it up elsewhere. So it's easy to say that because the city is out plowing all the streets, that all these problems are created by either the city contractors or city drivers, when there are many more subcontractors out there doing private work on businesses and private lots than we actually have out there fighting the storm.
Thank you. I'm going to
Thank you.
call on Councilor Ganasso now, member of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This past weekend, we had a storm in the nature of maybe 12, 14 inches of snow, but the difference was very heavy snow. Mm-hmm. And in certain terms, as people want these large plows to come down. But again, I'm going to repeat what I said previously. In the area I represent, the streets off of Revere Street, namely, and the streets off of Malden Street that I represent, and up on the hill, a smaller apparatus is needed and required. I had a pickup truck doing in front of the property that I live at in my surrounding area, and he did an unbelievable job. And it was a very heavy snow. And so if it weren't for the fact that it was a small plow, you couldn't get down Lowell Street. They were parked on both sides. You couldn't get down Boston Street or Pierce Street and all those side streets. So in fairness to everybody who lives in the area, it's public safety factor based on the fact that if a fire apparatus or police personnel had to get to a location in that district, it couldn't get there if it weren't for the small plows. So they serve a purpose, and a tremendous purpose.
They do. There are a lot.
Again, I just wanted to be mindful for in 27 inches of storm we had in the previous storm. Where do you put it? You can't put it in the street. You can't put it in the sidewalk. I mean, someone has to look in the mirror and say, where does common sense come in this particular position? Where do they put the snow if they can't put it in the sidewalk and they can't put it in the street? Where do they put it? And everybody, unfortunately, don't have these large yards so they could put it all in the yard. So you can't even say that. So we're in a restricted area, densely populated, and homes in close proximity to one another. What do? You know what I think you did? I think you did a great job. And there are a number of people, maybe that were experiencing some concerns about this, and rightfully so. Not everybody was out of this completely. But I would say, and to be very objectively, 90% of the community was dealt with very, very nicely, and maybe that 10% fell through the cracks, or maybe more work had to be done. But then, again, given the standards and conditions that were given to us, what do you do with it? You know, someplace we have to, we can sit here and make motions and do things, and, practicality, what do you do with it? We have ordinances already on the books that we're supposed to enforce. I mean, how could you realistically send someone down to make an enforcement in those storms based on the fact there wasn't any place to put the stuff? Right. So I think for the most part, everybody, including neighbors, my neighbors all chipped in, all did, and I just feel, again, I'm repeating myself, but it's worthy of mentioning to you, Paul, because you weren't at that particular meeting, that I think everybody in my area, I've been here a while, And I haven't received as many calls these past two storms ever before. Never. I mean, I haven't, and so that means one thing. People are being served, and they're satisfied with what the service is. So, great job. You did it. And there are instances where the large apparatus is warranted and needed. And I suggest that those are on the hills and on the main streets. Because on the main streets, we do curb to curb, and on the hills, we try to do curb to curb, and that's where they should be. But on the side streets, common sense has to play with smaller apparatus, and I think that we service the purpose.
Thank you,
Good
Councilor
job.
Nasso. Councilor Reardon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Paul,
Yes.
just out of curiosity, and I note the motion was to examine the guidelines for hiring plow drivers. Do
Yeah.
we actually have any written guidelines?
Well, we have a process that in September and October, people come into us and file applications.
Okay.
We check their registration and check their insurance to make sure it's accurate and up to date. And then we do interview them to see that they have experience plowing. Most of the people that plow for us have been with us for years. There's very few new people that come on. There are some, and we're constantly looking for new people, but we do have an interview process if we don't know the person to give us an idea if they've plowed city streets before, because some people have plowed parking lots. It's a whole different animal. So yes, we do.
Well, you don't actually have any written guidelines is what I'm getting to. And
I suppose.
And the reason I'm getting there is because it seems to me that it makes a lot of sense to have at least some rudimentary guidelines.
Well, we have an application
Right.
that they answer a series of questions
Right.
as to their experience and what's expected of them.
Right, but
So
if
that
you-
is included in the application.
But what maybe you ought to attach to the application is some minimal guidelines
Right.
so that they can understand, don't bother applying here if you can't produce at least 2 years' experience, for instance, if that's what you require, or if you cannot produce a valid registration, a minimum a liability insurance, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
It seems to me that if you put
We-
that
we
stuff
do have
down,
that. Yes,
it might,
yes.
you do have that?
Yes, we do.
All right, that's what I was asking.
Okay.
And I'll concur with Councilor Ganasso. And I live in a hilly area, as you know, because you live there yourself.
Right.
And quite honestly, the biggest problem we have is that we have more cars than we have areas to park them on,
Right.
primarily, and that causes a whole string of problems when it comes to snow plowing. But given those restrictions, I think the DPW is doing a fabulous job on the hilly areas in this city, because I make sure I drive up and down, and within hours after the last snowflake has fallen, those streets are almost, at least a pathway down the middle of the street is down to the pavement, and I don't think you can ask for better than that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Reardon. Councilor Patch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to say great job this past storm, for a storm that even the weathermen got wrong.
Right, exactly.
That you had a late start, but I didn't get one complaint in Ward 6 in my area, Johnny Road. The Festa Construction Mercurial Brothers did an outstanding job, so I just want to say good job. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Patch. Councilor Penta.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be brief, Paul. I agree with all the councilors spoke. I mean, the last challenging storms. Did I get complaints? I got a couple. But I mean, it's difficult for the residents out there to know what you have to go through. Because the few complaints that I got basically weren't anybody's fault. In other words, I know somebody got hurt in a plow. You have to rearrange people to go there. Maybe a plow may be down, hydraulics, whatever it may be, and you're shifting them. So, it may be an hour or two before they get back to that area, and they have an inch or two. And, and it's something we have to live with because things happen. I mean, accidents happen and everything else. And the biggest complaint I get is the small little side street with 1 or 2 houses on it that, during the storm, they're going by, they got bigger plow, they can't get up those. Right. The smaller plow, and it may take after the storm or whatever. And those are probably the biggest complaints I get.
Right.
And then if you have somebody new that, someone got hurt, the truck went down, Donnie knows the issue on Pearl Ave, the bottom of it, they blocked the catch basins and stuff, and got to send a backhoe down there and stuff. But, I mean, all in all, like I think somebody said, 98%, 99%, you do a great job. And most of the complaints are for a reason there's something that happened while the storm was going on. I mean, you got 4 or 5 pieces of equipment. The first storm, I was actually with Donnie driving around, and we got stuck, 2 other plows got stuck, and it was just, that street went without being plowed for an hour until we got all the 3 trucks out. But these things happen. But I want to commend you and your workforce. I mean, people don't realize, these kids go around, them guys go around the clock, 24, 48 hours, they might catch an hour here and there. But I think Councilor Novoselsky came up, and I think it's a good idea. And Haas basically said, Councilor Haas, about identifying the non-city trucks, that they are plowing for the city. And it's just more eyes for you. I mean, a resident can call up and say, gee, this guy went up and down the street with his plower.
Right.
You know, maybe he's doing a side job somewhere else in a lot he probably shouldn't be at. So I think that's a good thing, you know, probably to implement probably next winter.
Yeah, I mean, we discussed that before. The problem that arises from that is if you had, say, somebody was assigned to the Reservoir Hills, and they were going back to the city yard to pick up more salt and sand, they'd be going back to the city. They're more or less in a hurry. They're not plowing. They're going back there. Their plow is going to be up, so they get there and back to where they need to, where their work assignment is. So it looks like they're not plowing, but they're in the, you know, the transportation mode of going between to or from the city yard where they get their salt and material.
I can understand that, but what I'm saying, with Councilor Novoselsky come up with a
The
flag.
flag.
All that
I
is,
was going to get to that.
but if a guy's going back to the yard and I call, geez, I seen one of your guys going, you can mark down, well, yes, thank you for the call. We knew he was going back to the yard.
But the problem is identifying the exact vehicle, because a flag in itself does nothing more to tell us that they're working for us. Now, we know everybody that's working for us, and this comes into play more with accidents than actually things that are going on in, you know, where their work area is, because your work is either done or it's not done in your area, and that's the bottom line. And the problem with the flag is we, you know, people call, you know, you people are plowing the streets. Yes. Well, my car got hit. Okay. Did you see the truck hit the? No. Can you identify the color, the name? So just by putting a flag on a vehicle is not going to make it that any easier for us to identify somebody that might have been in an accident. Now, do we have accidents? Yes, we had 2 in the last couple of storms, but that's all we had. And I'm sure that, you know, we've gotten calls from some side streets, other areas. The problem I have with all this is that most of our plows go up and down the streets pretty straightforward. And that's why some of the smallest trucks, like Councilor Guanasso was alluding to, on the side streets we put in there, because it's very difficult to put a big truck down some of these small side streets without causing some problems. We have a lot of problems in Council Reardon's area. We're getting up on Warren and Vane Street. We need police help. We got to tow cars. We got to do all kinds of stuff to get in and out of there. And then sometimes we got to send a small truck in. And while we're doing this, we have these contractors going in and out of driveways, piling snow up on corners. So these are the people that are transferring across the streets, within the streets, across parking lots, across streets, across intersections. So we feel that's where the bigger problem is with the accidents. But a flag, some other type of identifying metallic magnets thing that goes on the back, it's not a big issue. The only thing I think is that getting them back will be an issue.
Thank you, Donald. I'm going to thank you, Councilor Penta. I'm going to call on Councilor Haas now, then Councilor Novoselsky. And I'm not directing this comment to any one individual, but I would ask that the remarks be kept brief. We can do away with some of the redundancy. We have 2 other hearings here this evening. Councilor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I spoke a couple of weeks ago on this issue, DPW did a great job. I know that's been a little redundant. I represent the Fenley and the Hills in that area there, and I'll tell you, Quality did an absolutely tremendous job. You know, once they open it up in the middle, and then they come with the second pass, a little to the right, third pass, a little to the left, and they were right on it. And I've always had a problem getting up the hill, Ensign, and they put a lot of salt down, seemed to work. I started the morning at 7 o'clock going into Chelsea, take my wife to work, and, you know, some people thought we were bad Revere. You should go to Chelsea. And as always, Friday I took my tour, going down to Asti, going out to sea. I had no problems at all. The only problem I had is Friday night going to Leverett Ave in Beachmont. I fell into that major trench. Talking about trenches, are we going to do something about these people, contractors who open up the streets, and then basically it sinks through time. I mean, I think we have to do something to get them back into.
Counselor, with all due respect, I'd like to
Yeah, the
do
problem
that
with-
on another night. And
Yeah, that's just
We're talking
what
about
happens is
snowplow.
most of those trenches are more than a year old, Bob, and they're only responsible for the trench for a year.
Yeah, but
That's-
Mr. Chairman, snow affects the trenches
Yes, they
in
do.
in a major way, as you know. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Hess. Counselor Novoselsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know we're all giving kudos to you, to the DPW, which we always want to do anyways, but,
Give me a time.
and I know the issue, and I talked about it the other night when we had this, as far as what they get paid, where you think people should go based on the size of their vehicle. I know a lot of small streets. We even did Walnut Place for next year as a snow
There's an
emergency.
emergency artery, yeah.
So, you know, even though it's so small, no truck can get down there, even a small truck, when there's cars parked there. So, you know, I thank you and the commission, Traffic Commission, for doing that. But the biggest problem I had the last storm, and I talked to you about it, was, you know, why the areas weren't plowed at 7 o'clock in the morning, and you told me that they were all at the schools.
Correct.
You know, and, you know, I had a problem with that. I have a problem with the dead ends at Walnut Ave, Florence Ave, Arlington Ave, Francis Street, those dead ends up there, you know, and I get constant calls up there. And, you know, be honest with you, I'm sick and tired of hearing from these folks saying, nobody came down to salt my street, or why are we always the last street to get done? And so that's, you know, that's my issues.
Well, the real issue, Council, is that when they make their first couple of rounds up through the hills, they don't do the dead ends. I'd be the first one to admit that. Dead ends are the biggest problem. They got to back down. The biggest problems that we have in any area, not just yours, Beachmont, especially Council Reardon's area, the Fenley Hills, right off of Beach Street, that we have 7 hill communities within the city. And the problem is if you're spending, say, 40, 45 minutes of the first part of the storm, I understand it's a dead end. It's not that hilly. We try to get the Centennial Aves, the Walnut Aves, the Thorntons, the Highlands, the Sumners, the stuff that if somebody comes up and they're going for a sleigh ride, whereas it might take them a couple more minutes to get up the backside of Florence and Arlington and James, Walnut Avenue, Francis Street. Council Penta has the same problem in his area with the dead-end streets off of Broad Sound, off of Belle Isle, off of Broad, you know, so it's something that we could work on if we had more equipment and we could assign like a piece just to do the dead ends and put a small truck up there. We do that when we can. But especially this last storm, I think, and I don't lay blame on anybody because my thought was the chief and I sat down, both the fire and police chief sat down. The National Weather Bureau was telling us we were going to get somewhere around 4 inches of snow. So, you know, and I think that the superintendent of schools was under the same thought that we were only going to get, 2 to 4 inches of snow. We ended up getting 13 inches of snow, which really put a test on our ability to get the schools open. At the same time, try to keep the commuter traffic going with the limited amount of resources that we do have. So some of those areas that you're referring to did not get done. So we're sitting there trying to prioritize who do we go to first. Well, obviously, the kids are the most important part, so we want to make sure that the schools are done. Then we get onto the emergency arteries. Then we get into the main drags, and then you get out to those arterial issues last. And in a perfect world, that shouldn't happen, but it is going to happen. And I'd be lying to you if I said, no problem, I'll take care of it the next time. It will happen again. And it's not that we don't want to treat everybody the same. It's just that depending on the severity of the snow coming down at the time, what other equipment going down. We lost our biggest piece of equipment in your area that day. We lost another piece of equipment in Beachmont, a big piece, until we could get a substitute driver. Somebody hurt themselves there. Contractors didn't bring some heavy equipment in for us. So this last storm, as bad as the blizzard was with the 23 inches, this last storm, from an operational standpoint, was more difficult for Paul and myself to handle than the blizzard.
So,
Counselor.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I know we want to go on, and I'll just hold off here for another day.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Councilor Rigo.
Thank you, Chairman Powers. Thanks, Donnie, for being here. It sounded like we have a lot of equipment issues. Do we have that on any bond schedule, or is that on a capital planning project list?
The newest equipment that the city owns is, what we're in dire need of right now is probably a couple of medium-sized front-end loaders with some blades, and our bigger trucks are 7 years old now, 8 years old. So at some point, you know, the bond authorization on the last round of equipment is 7, 8 years old. So 10 years, we should have a plan in place. That's not really the ultimate way to do things. I think if we had, you know, you can have an overall capital plan every 10 years, but in between, like every 2 or 3 years, if you bought a piece of equipment, you know, something, a specialized piece of equipment, I think the new thing that the city really needs to look at in the future on our next capital expenditures is getting some of these sidewalk plows so we can deal with this piling of the snow on corners on Broadway, Revere Street, around the schools and things of that nature. So, you know, we sat down, we've had some preliminary discussions about it, and in our next round of equipment purchasing, we'll be looking at some of those things, Council.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilor Rigo. Donald, I'm just going to conclude this part of the meeting with a comment. I've had people call me that have handicap signs in front of their homes. And I'm just wondering if we couldn't instruct, and Paul, maybe this addresses yourself too, if we couldn't just instruct the people that are plowing, not only our own people, but the people that are plowing, the outside contractors, to take care when they hit those spots there so that they don't wind up plowing in a handicapped spot, because being handicapped is difficult enough, you know, when you're dealing with a snowstorm.
Our program is this, Council. While it's snowing, it's very difficult to even see what's on a lot of these signs. As Paula will attest to, is when the storm is over, if we have handicapped people that call us and tell us, listen, I can't shovel, you know, we have an issue, we'll send a truck down to help them. That being said, it's only for the handicap, because every person in the city would be coming and saying, listen, we need you to come down and clear the space in front of our house. So we really do try to keep it to the elderly and the handicap about clearing spots in front of people's houses and opening up driveways, because some of the handicapped people don't have signs. They have driveways, and they can't, they're just as a bigger problem to them of getting out of their driveway if they can't shovel it. So we do go down and open up some of these driveways in order for the elderly and the senior citizens to gain access to and from their house.
Thank you, Donald. And that concludes that first meeting of the Ways and Means Subcommittee meeting. We'll have one more after, but I've got another issue. Would you read the first item on the agenda, please?
City Council Order 13-028 pursuant to MGL Chapter 166, Section 22, petition from Crown Castle NG East, Inc. for a permit to install conduit and fiber locations to existing utility and streetlight poles on Franklin and Walnut Avenues.
Your proponents? Okay, turn the microphone on, please.
Joshua Trauner, Government Relations Counsel for Crown Castle. Thank you for having us here this evening. We are representing Crown Castle for Crown Castle NG East, which is a telecommunications carrier registered with the Massachusetts Department of Telecommunications. We've applied for permission to install conduit and fiber within the city's public rights of way. Pursuant to the Massachusetts Pole Attachment Act, we were in front of the City Council several weeks ago. This matter was referred here to the Public Works Committee. In the interim, we met with City Council President Novoselsky, who had some requests regarding our planned fiber route. In response to the request, we've redesigned our fiber route to no longer need to trench under any city streets. We're going to get the fiber to the pole line aerially from where it originates. There will be no trenching involved, and I'm here to answer any further questions.
Well, I'm going to open this up to Council President Novoselsky. I'm sure he has some questions, and I'd ask everyone to be as, brief as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, we can be very brief on this. I did meet with the gentleman down on the site at 50 Walnut Avenue. I told him we did not want to allow them to dig under a brand-new street that we had over there, and they were very agreeable, and they did come up with a new route, aerial route, right from the building over to the poles. They do not have to dig the streets. I have no problem with this, and I would hope that the committee comes out favorably with this, and we can vote on this tonight and let them move ahead with their project. Thank you.
Certainly, Mr. President. Are there any other councilors that would like to speak on this particular matter? Hearing none, we'll go to the next item on the agenda. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Okay. City Council 13-057, motion presented by Councilor Powers, that the mayor request the superintendent of public works or designee to appear before the Committee on Public Works to advise said committee as to what caused the malfunction of the tide gate that services the eastern county ditch. Further, that the City Council be advised as to what steps need to be taken to prevent any further occurrences or failure of the tide gate in question. Also, be advised as to what steps need to be taken to correct the problems in the area of 611 to 660 Revere Beach Boulevard to prevent raw sewage from backing up into homes in that area.
Donald, as you know, a couple of weeks ago we had a tremendous flood. The tide gate malfunctioned. People in the Oak Island area, the Sagamore, Shawmut Street area, or in the Bay Road area also were inundated with severe flooding. And I'd like to know, basically, if you'd advise this committee as to what caused that and what you are doing in the future to make sure that that's not a reoccurrence.
As you're aware, Council, I don't know if the rest of the council were aware. A couple of years ago, we put an electronic a sluice gate in there to work electronically. We did have a mechanical malfunction with one of the motors. The problem is that the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration has paid for that. We're trying to restore the salt marshes in behind those areas, and they're all below sea level. So the big problem is, when the high water alarm came in, we were in the area. We responded and shut that thing within 5 minutes of the first alarm coming in. That may not happen in the middle of the night. So this was kind of a test for us. There was, in some areas, more flooding than others. We had street flooding. We had water all the way back to the Wonderland parking lot. And for that to happen in a 5-minute period of time, it could have been a lot worse if it was 10 or 15 or 20 minutes. So what we've done, we have the gate on manual now. I have the electrician coming in. I'm going to meet with NOAA because I feel there needs to be some type of fail-safe mechanism added to the system that we have there now, John, that where we can go down and mechanically close that if we can add another motor and a relay so that if we do have a motor fault, that motor will instantly click in, shutting the gate, turning it into a gravity gate at that point. We've been running that gate on gravity since that day until we can come up with a remedy to correct that type of malfunction, because like I said, we were right on it. We do have a mission system, which is kind of a SCADA system that tells us when the high water alarm comes in, when my people respond there. So from the data we took from the computer, they were there within 5 minutes of the high water alarm coming in, and you saw the extent of water that
I did. I was down there.
It wasn't fun for you. It wasn't fun for us as well.
Okay. Now, are there any other councilors that have any questions on the tide gate? No. Any other councilors? Councilor Haas.
Thank you. As you know, I was outspoken about this when it happened. I spoke to Donnie prior to the council meeting. It was malfunction, and he's on top of it. They're making improvements to it. So I'm satisfied with your comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Council.
Donnie, I feel comfortable with your comments this evening, and I just hope that in the future, again, we won't have any reoccurrences,
Well,
because it's a terrible thing to have water, in your basement, destroying your property and causing you a hardship during a heavy rain event. Thank you, Donald.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming here this evening.
Thank you. You want to talk about the boulevard too, or the boulevard rear for the sewage?
Yeah, 611 to 660 Boulevard, that was a separate issue. That was a sewerage issue, backing up in people's homes down there, at least on 2 occasions that I know of. Would you care to address that?
Yes. The address that you are referring to is there's the very last house on the gravity line that goes back to the Point of Pines pump station. So there's not a lot of flow in there, John. And subsequently, it's an old line, it's a very flat line. So it doesn't really move that well unless it's got something behind it to push it or some water coming down. The last couple of times we've been there in the past, we've experienced some trouble with that line, but we've got that on a regularly scheduled maintenance list now to go down and clean it. We've probably cleaned that 5 times since September. So the line itself is clean. It's just very flat. The last couple of times we were at that address in question, it's difficult to explain to a homeowner that part of the problem is their responsibility as well as ours as well. I mean, there's really not much more we can do with the main line unless we cut his line off and then tie it back in and drop it into the force main, because the force main is right next door. The 2 manholes are pretty close proximity to each other. So what happens is he's at the end of the line, he doesn't get a lot of flow. If we could drop it into the other side, and then once the force main kicks in the manhole, it'll flush out that manhole. That's something that could be done, or a small ejection system in the homeowner's house would also alleviate that problem. The last couple of times we were there, we go, he doesn't believe us, we go back, we do it again, and then he gets his plumber, and then the plumber calls us, can you run the line for us? We can't. Our equipment is too powerful. If we run up 1,500 pounds of pressure into a small little service line in a house, who's ever sitting on the toilets going for a ride, I mean, these are the things that happen. If we go up service lines with our equipment, we do damage to the property. We have water flowing into people's houses because the jetters run at 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 pounds of water pressure. So it's not something that we can easily just send up a service line on a house. And the last 2 times we were there, it was a house block, John. But we have had problems in that area, and that might be something that can be done in the future. But I think they need to be cognizant of what his tenants are throwing down that line, because we've pulled mop heads out of there, piles of paper towel out of there. There's a lot that's going on there.
As a matter of fact, I was down there again that day, and I made it a point to advise him to speak to his tenants, to be sure that there was no material going into that line that could cause a block-up. What I'm going to ask is if perhaps if yourself or Frank Stringy, even, I'm not sure who, could put together some type of a price. Maybe some money could be used out of the SRF fund to replace that line, because it is flat, and it's very difficult to get, liquid to flow on a flat line.
In order to do the entire line, I think maybe if we could just separate that end house, because that house seems to be the only one that's having a problem, John, since we put a regularly scheduled maintenance program on that line, because we do know it is that flat. We haven't had a lot of problems there since we did some point repairs and some relining. So the problem seems to be at that last house. If we can move it to the other manhole where the force main ties into, that may be a remedy. It may not be a remedy. It may still be within the house itself. So, and the big question is whether it's SRF eligible.
Yeah. Is there any question? Is there any chance we could get Charlie Lombardi to look at that, perhaps?
We could. We do have him on the
He's very
contract.
knowledgeable.
Yeah, we could have him look at that. But
Okay.
at the same time, we would also need to do some investigative work. You need to get a video camera truck into that building. we need to get a video camera truck that we already have for our own line. That line always holds a little bit of water because it is that flat. So there's not a lot of movement until it gets to the pump station, and the pump station forces it back up a separate line.
Donnie, thank you very much for
Thank
your
you,
attendance
Counsel.
here this evening. Ashley, would you call the roll on the previous?
This is on the petition for conduit and fiber locations on streetlight poles at Franklin and Walnut Avenues. Counselor Guanasso?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Patch?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Penta?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Reardon?
Yes.
Yes. And Chairman Powers?
Yes, and
Yes.
that'll be reported out later this evening on committee reports. This concludes the meeting of the Public Works Subcommittee. And now I'll turn this over to Councilor Ganasso for the Appointments Committee.